Us this morning, either virtually or in person, for our February JPACT meeting. I will say for the folks that have joined us in person, we have a whole bunch of snacks behind me, including pan dulce and some cafecito. So please enjoy that at different points of the meeting. So I'm looking forward to having an engaging conversation today. As always, we have a lot of important work to get through, and I appreciate everyone's time and dedication to the 7:30 JPACT meeting. While Connor continues to bring members into the meeting, I'm going to call roll. And just as a reminder of the brief announcement that was made for technology purposes, we're asking folks that even if you're in the room, in the meeting, that you still join the Zoom call so that you can raise your hand. So, we're figuring it out, so appreciate the... I don't know how to recognize that action, Curtis, but thank you. What is that? So let's get into it. Multnomah County Commissioner Sushila Jayapal.
Present.
Washington County Commissioner Nafisa Fai. Not here yet. Clackamas County Commissioner Paul Savis.
Present.
City of Portland Commissioner Mingus Maps.
Here.
Good morning. Cities of Multnomah County Mayor Travis Stovall.
Here.
Cities of Washington County Mayor Steve Calloway.
Present.
Cities of Clackamas County, I see a familiar face, Mayor Joe Buck.
I'm here.
Welcome, very nice to see you. ODOT, Ryan Winsheimer.
Present.
TriMet, General Manager Sam DeSue.
Present.
Port of Portland, Curtis Robinhold.
Here.
DEQ, Ali Mirzakhalili.
Here. Morning.
Good morning, Ali. Metro Councilor, Juan Carlos Gonzalez, present. Metro Council, Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Good morning. Metro Councilor Ashton Simpson.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Good morning. WashDOT, Carly Francis.
Present.
Good morning. City of Vancouver, Mayor Ann McInerney Ogle.
Good morning, Chair. We're present.
Good morning. In Clark County, I show TBD on my notes, but
So no, that's had a change.
okay, excellent. Please,
Can
Margaret,
I-
if you could guide me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we'd like to formally welcome Sean Daughtery from CTRAN. RTC, which is our sister MPO across the river, our JPACT bylaws say that they, as an entity, can elect 3 representatives to sit on JPACT. And so those representatives can come from WashDOT. So we have Carly Francis here, City of Vancouver with Mayor McInerney Ogle. And then that other seat, the third seat, can come from either Clark County or CTRAN. So RTC has recently voted to replace the Clark County seat with the CTRAN seat, and we welcome Executive Director Sean Daughtery in this seat.
All right, excellent. So, calling roll, Sean Daughtery.
Present.
Excellent. So good to see you, and thank you for joining us, Sean. As a reminder, public comment may be submitted in writing and will also be heard by electronic communication. And I also want to acknowledge Commissioner Fai has joined the room, so welcome, Commissioner. Written comments should be submitted electronically by emailing legislativecoordinator@oregonmetro.gov. If you have not already signed up to testify, you can sign up by virtually raising your hand. Those calling in on the phone can raise their hands by dialing *9. The raise hand function is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Connor, can you let us know if anyone signed up to testify?
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. We've not had anybody sign up in advance to speak. However, we have had some written testimony that was distributed to JPACT members yesterday. And with that, looking at the attendees, nobody has their hands up at the moment to give testimony. So just giving folks another second or two. And as a reminder, if you're dialing in on your phone, you can hit the *9 button. All right, and still no hands going up, Chair.
All right, thanks, Connor. And as you were looking into that, we were doing some heavy mathematics and calculus back here, and we can declare quorum has been met. So thank you, everyone. A few updates before we get into our agenda. Our JPACT trip to Washington, D.C. this year is moving forward, so book your calendars because I would love everyone to be there. The tentative dates are June 6th to 8th, and please look out for more communication on this trip soon. It's a tremendous opportunity for our region to show up together with one voice to talk about our priorities, our projects, and the kind of transportation system we want to build in this region for our communities. Also, the RTP team is planning another, please join, mute. Just a reminder for everyone in the room to mute. The RTP team is planning another joint council JPACT workshop for May to discuss the analyzed project list. That workshop is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, May 11th from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. here at your favorite regional center, MRC Metro. We'll continue to provide a hybrid option for folks that can't join us in the morning. I'd also like to announce that Metro has been awarded a $2.4 million federal highway Safe Streets for All grant, an enormous victory for moving our vision of a safer transportation system for people of all mobilities forward. $1.2 million will be used by Metro to enhance regional and local crash data analysis and identify a list of quick-build pedestrian safety projects. And $1.2 million of the grant will go to Washington County, Tigard, Multnomah County, and the cities of East Multnomah County to develop comprehensive safety action plans, building their capacity to implement effective safety projects. Finally, thank you to each of you for accepting to meet with me throughout these first months of the year. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know all of you better, especially in our one-on-ones, to continue making this meeting more useful, more effective, and obviously to improve our collaboration together. Before we get into the first bit of business, I want to acknowledge that every month we read the names of victims of our transportation system. In doing so, we honor their lives and are reminded of the work we must do to create a safer system and healthier communities. I see Margie stepped away very briefly, but Margie, our Deputy Director of Planning, will provide this update.
Good morning. For this month, the fatal traffic crash report is as follows. Unidentified walking in Multnomah County. Mary walking in Multnomah County. Unidentified walking in Multnomah County. Glenard driving in Washington County. Tyler driving in Multnomah County. Miguel driving in Clackamas County. Penny driving or walking in Multnomah County. Lourdes walking in Washington County, and unidentified driving in Multnomah County.
Thank you, Margie, and thank you to all our partners that help us put together this list as our North Star for our meeting today. Moving forward into our consent agenda, we do have 2 items on it today. First is resolution number 23-5308 for the purpose of amending the 2021-24 MTIP to ensure previously approved funding is available to support planning activities in the SFY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. Second is consideration of the January 19, 2023 JPACT minutes.
If I may, Chair, I think that the resolution number may be wrong.
Callaway, so moved.
Stovall, second.
All right, I have a first by Mayor Callaway and a second by Mayor Stovall. I am being notified by the Metro attorney that there is a discrepancy in the notes if you would like to share.
Yes, thank you. Just for the record, this is resolution number 23-5315 for the purpose of amending the 2021-24 MTIP to ensure previously approved funding is available to support planning activities in the SFY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program.
Okay, excellent. I'm hoping those motions carry with the small administrative correction. Mayors Callaway and Stovall, just a quick Had not? All right, excellent, thank you. If I could call for a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Maps moves, and I see Commissioner Savis has hand raised. For a second, or for a comment?
You want my virtual hand raised, right?
Yes. I don't, okay, excellent. Dude, Commissioner, was that a second, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right, want to make sure, unless it was a comment. Folks, we're going to figure this out, okay? And we're going to go back to our constituents and tell them we did it, okay? All right, excellent. With our first and our second, if I could call a vote for all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, seeing none, our consent agenda passes unanimously. We did it. Action item 5.1, our first action item of the day, resolution number 23-5306. All right, correct. For the purpose of endorsing the preferred alternative for the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge project. Alex Orshak of Metro is here today with Megan Neal and Taylor Steenblock from Multnomah County to provide an update on the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge project. They will be requesting a recommendation from JPACT on the proposed resolution to endorse the project's preferred alternatives. Welcome, and excellent to see you today.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Great to see everybody in person for, I think, the first time since 2020. It's really exciting to have everyone here. So this morning, just as the Chair said, we'll be briefing you a little bit on where we're at right now with the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge project, and then hopefully getting an endorsement from you all for our locally preferred alternative. So with that, did you want me to notify someone to switch the slides, or is there a switch? Oh, go ahead and go to the next slide. And for our agenda this morning, we'll talk a little bit about our project purpose and need, and we'll talk a little more specifically about the work we've been doing around resiliency. And then we have some analysis we've done about how this will actually economically benefit the region as well as the state, specifically around number of jobs and income tax revenue and other sorts of benefits. We'll talk a bit about what the preferred alternative looks like. And we haven't actually started really going through the design process yet, so this will be a pretty high-level overview of the direction that we plan to go for your resolution today. And then a bit on the project timeline, which, spoiler alert, will mostly be about funding. And then we'll talk a little bit about the resolution sequence today from our partner at Metro. And then finally, we will facilitate some discussion. So next slide. And I'll hand it off to my colleague, Megan.
Thank you, Taylor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Neal. I'm an engineering services manager with the county, and I'm also the county's project manager for Earthquake Ready. I just wanted to start off and just ground this group and why the county is making this its top priority transportation project for the next 15 years. As a reminder, the looming Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is really going to cause devastation to our transportation network. Many of these routes our emergency response professionals are relying on to be utilized after the major earthquake, but in fact, many of them are highly vulnerable and will not be able to be used after the earthquake. On this map, in the blue lines are our adopted regional emergency transportation routes. The green and red dots represent either seismically resilient or seismically vulnerable bridges or overpasses along these routes. So as you can see, we really can't rely on some of the main arterials that are established emergency transportation routes. It's really going to come down to our local network. And it just so happens that the Burnside corridor, which is an emergency transportation route, that line in yellow there, is actually relatively free of vulnerable overpasses and bridges. And right in the center, across the Willamette River, is the Burnside Bridge. And we feel that it's the county's responsibility to bring this bridge up to current seismic code to provide at least one bridge that will be immediately usable after the looming Cascadia subduction earthquake. The Willamette River is going to divide our region after this event, and we need a resilient link to help our region recover. Next slide, please.
And I know it can get a little exhausting talking about all the terrible things that are going to happen after an earthquake, but just a few more reminders. So an earthquake in our region is going to result in some pretty significant economic loss. We will likely see roughly 70% of businesses forced to close at least temporarily, which could impact a lot of people when it comes to jobs and security for income. And then also, we are very worried about businesses closing and resulting in a net loss for the region in terms of income tax and other kinds of revenue generation. So not only are we looking at saving lives, which is very, very important and our number one North Star for this project, but we're also trying to find ways that will enable not just parts of our region, but in our entire region to remain connected after the earthquake, in hopes that that will help us recover a little bit more, I don't want to say easily, but we'll have options, which is really going to be key when we recover from this event. And then the other thing I did want to mention in terms of purpose and need, so while we are very worried about the earthquake and we are trying to prepare and we are trying to make sure that we have at least one bridge that will be usable immediately after the earthquake, we also want to make sure that the bridge that we're building today also meets the evolving needs of people who are trying to get around our region. And I know this has been a topic of conversation at JPACT and other transportation tables. So the bridge that's out there today doesn't really meet a lot of these needs. It's really congested. It doesn't have really a very safe experience for bikes and pedestrians and other people who might want to walk or roll on the bridge. So what we are really trying to do is create a bridge that serves the needs now, but is going to be resilient and effective for the next 100 years, which is roughly a lifespan of a bridge that we would build in its place. Next slide.
So again, after the earthquake, we really feel this bridge is going to help our region respond and recover and evacuate after a major earthquake. There are 9 bridges downtown currently, however, none are expected to be immediately usable. So that's why we are really anticipating relying on this bridge to help respond and recover. As Taylor mentioned, there's going to be devastating business income losses, but with this crossing, our analysis shows that we could at least save $240 million of that loss. And as Taylor mentioned, this bridge is old and we're trying to ensure that it continues to serve our transportation needs for the next 100 years. Replacing the bridge now will save approximately $460 million from recurring maintenance over the next 50 years. Next slide, please. So just in closing, to wrap up our purpose and need, this bridge project is really about 3 things: seismic resiliency immediately after the earthquake, and then the 5, 10, 15 years following it, it will help our region recover and rebuild. And then independent of the earthquake, this bridge is almost 100 years old, and we're looking to continue to have it serve our community for the long term. Next slide.
So just a little more information about the jobs and economic stimulus that would come from our project. And I know there's been some discussion at the legislature about a possible recession coming our way. So this is one of the ways that we can hopefully curb some of the impact to our region through these types of construction projects. We did some modeling based off of other major projects that Multnomah County has done to try and look at what the benefits would be, not just for us, but also for our surrounding counties in the region. And you can see the numbers up on this slide, but I did just want to note that, really, while we do reap most of the benefits of this project as the person who is the overseer of the work, there really are a lot of benefits, not just for our county but also for other counties in the region, and then also the state. So I think a big takeaway that we've been trying to bring to the legislature while having the funding side of the conversation is, look, this is an investment, but it also is going to benefit a lot of people. So we've had a lot of conversations with the business community, and they've been very supportive of our project, and we've been trying to find ways to make sure we can notify as many people as possible so that these the impact of the project is felt to a lesser degree, and the benefits are really maximized through this project. Next slide.
So given that we're here today to request approval of the preferred alternative, I just have a few slides to describe some general features of the proposed alternative. Up on the screen is what we're calling the replacement long span. It replaces the current bridge with a new movable bridge along the same alignment with just some slight differences from the existing bridge. Up on the screen are conceptual renderings of the structure types we've already decided to advance into the design phase. It will be a bascule style bridge that moves the same way that the existing bridge does. However, the key differentiating feature is that on the east side over I-5 and the railroad, we're looking at some options for very long spans to really get over that highly liquefiable soil there on the banks of the river. We're looking at either a tide arch on the left-hand side or a cable stay on the right-hand side. And we'll work on making that decision with our contractor once we have them on board in the design phase. Next slide, please. And just to touch on the unique seismic resilient features of the bridge, just want to take a moment and run through some interesting notes. So this bridge will be designed to resist the largest earthquake in North America. This is about 10 times the magnitude of the earthquake that recently hit Turkey. We will be replacing the shallow, aged timber piles that the bridge sits on now with robust concrete piling that goes almost down to 120 feet and socket into the bedrock. We've developed a highly advanced seismic design criteria that would be the first of its kind in Oregon. This was developed in coordination with a technical working group comprised of local and national experts in this field. We've done state-of-the-art modeling analysis that incorporates similar magnitude earthquakes from Chile and Japan. There's no book that you can pick up that tells you what the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is going to look like for this region. We don't have that data, so we have to really look worldwide and to kind of in order to tailor the earthquake to our local region. We are again wanting this bridge to be immediately operable after a major earthquake, so it'll be designed to be usable even if the earthquake happens when the bridge is in the open position. And then finally, having a resilient link downtown across the river will likely influence all other regional agency plans around resiliency once it is certain that this bridge will be, and this route will be the priority one route for our agencies to use after the earthquake. Next slide, please. Last slide about the preferred alternative, just wanted to touch on the typical cross-section that we're advancing into design. We actually spent about a year looking at ways to reduce the overall cost of the project, and the main cost reduction strategy was actually to reduce one vehicular lane off the bridge. So we're proposing to reduce the bridge from 5 lanes to 4. However, I just wanted to highlight that in that reduction, we are still preserving many non-vehicular modes of travel, improving many non-vehicular modes of travel. We're still preserving safer, wider bicycle and pedestrian lane multi-use paths than there are today, separated by traffic with a physical barrier. We're also preserving the existing eastbound transit-only lane, as well as providing the option to implement a westbound transit-only lane in the future, should the city want to move in that direction. And then we'll also be designing the bridge for future streetcar lines, again, should the city want to head in that direction. So this bridge is really, again, as Taylor mentioned, thinking about future modes of transit and use of the bridge for our region on into the future. Next slide, please.
So just a little bit about where we are at right now. You can see the diamond in the middle of this visual, which is where we are right now. And we've done most, if not all, of the environmental review phase. I think this actually would mark pretty much one of the last steps in that process. And we're heading into design. And you can see below that we're funded partway through construction right now. So the way that we've funded the project to date is through local vehicle registration fees. And that's really important to note at this table because in 2018, Multnomah County received the ability from the legislature to increase our vehicle registration fee up to what the state currently charges. We actually don't charge quite as much as the state does, but we're close, and our regional partners were able to help us in that they were willing to allow us to keep that portion that they may have received from that increase to put towards bridges. So while we do have, a lot of this money is Multnomah County collected, I just want to say thank you to all the partners in this room who were willing to allow us to move forward with the first $300 million of funding for this project. As I'm sure many of you are thinking right now who can do math in the room, that's about a third of the total project cost. It's about $900 million or just under. So what we're currently pursuing is an ask of the state legislature for another $300 million. And we are pursuing as many federal grants as we possibly can. I think everyone at this table knows that there are quite a few other major projects in the region that are happening, specifically related to bridges, and we're very aware of that. And so we've done everything in our power to try and fund this bridge in a way that's not competing with those other asks. And we've also worked really hard when we do end up applying for the same grant as, say, our partners at ODOT, to try to explain why our two projects don't actually replace one another. They're very specifically related, and you need both of them for our region to be seismically resilient. Specifically around IBR, one of those is a north-south connection and the other is an east-west. They obviously overlay one another at the connecting point with I-5, and so really getting both of these bridges replaced as soon as possible is going to be really important for this region. So to the extent possible, we're working together with our partners and also with our federal delegation to try and bring some federal funding back to the region for these projects as well. Next slide.
Thanks, Taylor. Alex Rorschach, Senior Transportation Planner and Metro Staff Lead for the project. Just want to talk really quickly about the process we've been taking. Last month, we brought this to JPACT, the resolution, and they voted to advance a recommendation to JPACT. The resolution that they recommended is in your packet, along with exhibits and the staff report. And then should JPACT advance, make a recommendation today, we would bring that recommendation to Metro Council tentatively on March 16th, next month. Next slide, please. And then I want to make sure that the resolution title and number were on the screen for you. The specific request from JPACT today is a recommendation that Metro Council adopt resolution number 23-5306 for the purpose of endorsing the preferred alternative for the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge project. And Chair Gonzalez, that concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Folks, do we have any questions for staff? I see a few hands raised, and I will go through those. I also want to acknowledge that once we make a motion, Commissioner Jayapal has an amendment to be made as well. So just wanted folks to be aware of the process that we'll be taking for this recommendation today. So Mayor McInerney Ogle.
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. Not a question for staff, but as the chair of the RDPO, it would be my honor to make the motion to approve resolution 235306 for the purpose of endorsing the preferred alternative for the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge project. We know how important this bridge is. It's very similar to another bridge that is timber built, like little pretzel sticks stuck in mud. So we're looking forward to having this security in Portland.
Thank you, Mayor. Since that was a formal motion, I'll take a second and we can continue discussion.
Second.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Mapps. Thank you. So we can continue discussion. Curtis.
No, yeah, you're good.
No, good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just first a comment and then a question. First, I love the thinking about resilience in the region. Very supportive of the motion. I'll note that we're having the same discussion out at the airport with the south runway that we think is going to take a couple $100 million to reinforce and be ready for emergency response in the case of a major earthquake or national disaster. I put it in the same category of we should be thinking about this together. Did I turn it off? Thank you. It's my sophistication. The question is really, how will we tackle this competition for dollars, in particular at the state level? I think absolutely the strategy of pursuing the feds is the right approach. And maybe the answer isn't necessary now, but one day soon, we're going to have to be in the conversation around where the dollars go first, and it's a limited pot of funds. So I guess I'm curious about the staff thinking on how do we not compete with the Interstate Bridge project and the absolute need for both states to come in for $1 billion or so?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chair and Curtis Robinhold. I think the question kind of is, at least at the legislature right now, there's definitely a need, right? Like, we know Hood River has a bridge as well. We know that the Bridge of the Gods needs some investment for seismic resiliency. We know we have the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge and then the I-5 bridge. So with these 4 bridges and all of them kind of being in a similar situation, I would say Bridge of the Gods is actually probably in the best case situation because they just want to do a retrofit instead of a replacement. But we've been working really closely with the joint chairs of the Transportation Committee at the legislature, and I don't know that we're necessarily trying to prioritize them because I think it's very clear that the Interstate 5 bridge has a unique opportunity. And it is, you know, we had a recent infusion of federal dollars that we know was in part drafted with that bridge in mind. So I don't think that we feel as though we want to compete with them because we want them to be successful because that is an important part of seismic resilience in our region. The message we've been putting forward is essentially, how can we help you be more successful? Who is supportive of our project, and how can we bring them along on these other projects? How can we partner together to have a message that makes everybody feel included and not just the people who use one bridge or the other bridge? So while we don't necessarily have a formal bridge package pulled together at this point, I can say that at Multnomah County, that's been an idea we've kicked around. It's something we're really open to in terms of a conversation. But certainly we have no interest in, say, Multnomah County getting funding for the Burnside Bridge and then IBR not getting any funding. We're trying really hard to raise all boats.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe just as follow-up, and I appreciate that. You can call me Curtis. Everybody does. They call me worse things than Curtis. It does really seem to me that this call for a unified regional response also calls for a regional strategy on funding, and we should really get together and think about how we're going to fund the top tier projects as quickly as possible. So thank you for the response.
Yeah, Chair and Curtis. So I am definitely very ready and willing to have that conversation. I've already been trying to do that with some state partners. And to any extent that JPACT or any of the other regional partners in this room or virtually would like to be a part of that, I think our project team is really open to that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Very good point, Curtis, thank you. I see Mayor Callaway on Zoom with hand raised.
Good morning and thank you. I'm gonna, vote in favor, but just to have a few, I guess, clarifying questions. On the cross section of the bridge, it has an eastbound dedicated bus lane, but no dedicated bus lane headed westbound. Is that and that strikes me as odd because normally I would expect a dedicated bus lane in each direction. Excuse me, and when the future streetcar is built, will the buses and streetcar be sharing the same lane as it looks like in that cross section?
I think I might boot this one to Megan, our engineer on the project.
Sure. So the reason why there's not a westbound transit only lane today is there's not currently a need for it. And this is, I'm speaking on behalf of the city of Portland. Actually, they manage the traffic across this bridge and monitor the congestion. So should the congestion require a westbound bus lane in the future? Yes, it can be implemented. And then to speak to your question about the streetcar and the bus would share the outside lanes. Of course, a bus could go around the streetcar if that was possible. And that's sort of the beauty of having 2 lanes in each direction is that there's versus 1 lane in either direction is that there are options if someone is behind the streetcar and wants to pass it.
And
Thanks.
I think, sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. The slide that showed, I think it was kind of the 3 county investment, if you will, and it talked about construction hours, and so that is confusing. I think it was like 1,800 years of
Of job hours.
Was that like if one person were to do the job, it would take them 40 hours a week, 1,800 years to do it? Or how to explain that graphic to me?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Chair, Mayor. So what we measured the work in essentially is a job year. So that is one of the mechanisms that you can measure how many people will actually be employed, because, right, if you say how many people, you could have like one person working quarter time, one person working overtime, one person working half time. So rather than looking at the actual number of people that would be employed, we looked at the number of job years. So certainly those could all be happening consecutively. We're not going to say, well, one person does a job year and then another person for a total of 1,800 years. It's more like the total number of hours of available work on this project will be 1,800 job years.
Okay. Thank you. And then I guess the last question, knowing that US Bank Core Tower, is on Burnside and it's, over 500 feet tall, how, and we referenced the Turkey Syria quake, and that this bridge will be built to withstand 10 times that. If we had that 10 times, event, what would that do to all of, the infrastructure along Burnside? How long would, if we plan for a exponential, kind of earthquake, how long then is the modeling that it would take to clear up, Burnside, and so that the bridge could actually be used to go back and forth across the river? And I am curious also for cities in Washington County, that how do we access, the bridge? Is it through the Vista Ridge Tunnel, which I can't imagine? Is it Cornell up and over? Is it off of Skyline? Because no doubt all of that will have dramatic impact on the ability to get goods to and from, Burnside Bridge out to cities of Washington County.
Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about the modeling we did?
Sure. Actually, Burnside Corridor itself connects all the way into Washington County. It intersects with 26 it may have a different street name at the very end, but the corridor itself actually does go directly into Washington County. So that's how we would anticipate the Washington County using the corridor. You are right, there are still some vulnerabilities along the corridor. For example, there are some landslide vulnerabilities in the West Hills that would, unless it's addressed, in the next several years, would be debris that would need to be cleared. I don't have an estimate of how long it would take to clear that debris. That would be a question I would defer to city maintenance staff. So you are correct. We do anticipate needing some time to clear debris off the corridor itself to make the corridor fully usable throughout its length, which I think is like about 19 miles long.
But no guess on how long that would be.
I do not.
And oh, sorry, Chair, if I could follow up too, I just wanted to say really quickly, a lot of the work that we're doing around this project is not in a vacuum, right? So we know that a lot of the other vulnerabilities on Burnside Road, which compared to the other roads in the region are relatively few, but there are still some other projects that would need to happen along that road to make it a fully seismically resilient road. And we're very committed to regional conversations and projects to try and increase that resiliency. I think Megan always tells me resiliency in the region is a marathon, not a sprint, right? It's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of time to get there. But the reason why we specifically chose Burnside Bridge as opposed to any of the other bridges that we own, which are 6 different bridges across the river, is that it was downtown and that road had as few as possible barriers to making it a fully resilient road. But I think we do recognize the West Hills present some other challenges, and I think when you think about the aftermath, if we don't do the projects that are required in the West Hills, the good thing is that we will be clearing debris instead of having to rebuild a bridge. So I think even though it might take a little bit of time for us to access Washington County, that's our best option right now. And we're very much a partner in talking about how we can improve those other parts of the road as well.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could keep the conversation moving. Thank you for the questions and good conversation. I see Commissioner Maps has his name card raised the old school way, so I'm
sure.
assuming, I love it. It's a blast from the past. It's been 3 years.
It might make sense. I'm going to tee up Commissioner Jayapal's amendment. So it might make sense to finish the work that's being, I think we have one hand.
One
on
more
the screen.
hand?
We can
Okay,
do that.
I just wanted to acknowledge.
And then I'll make a recommendation, and then Commissioner Jayapal can jump in.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, Ali, I see your hand raised. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully this is a quick question. I don't have a. I think you made a good case about the logic and the need for the project, and presented the alternative, the preferred design. What I need to understand a little better is the inclusion of the project in the financially constrained 2023 RTP. Well, can you explain just real briefly, what does that mean? Is it replacing some project here because we have the financing in not all in place? How does that work? What does that do to the 23? Just add it to the list, or does it just bump something off?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to take this one because it has to do with the RTP. So right now, we are still in the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, and that list of projects is still relevant until we update the RTP in 2023, which is our next agenda item. So we're going to get into this. Because we are in an update, we are not amending the 2018 RTP. So what this resolution does today is it asks JPACT and Metro Council to consider it for the next RTP. So you are not, just to be clear, we're not doing an amendments right now to the 2018. If you read the resolution language, it directs you to consider it for the financially constrained in the next RTP. And I believe we've heard from Multnomah County that they do plan to move this project forward to construction, and they're financially constrained in the 10-year. And then you will take action on that when you take action on the entire RTP for 2023. Does that make sense?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you for the question, Ali. So Commissioner Fye, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question or a comment that you can make briefly?
Is this on? No.
Yes.
Is it on? Thank you. This was a really good presentation and something we've been hearing for a long time. So I think to be here today to ask for this endorsement, I know you spent a lot of time and you're bringing in a well-cooked alternative approach. I did have a question around the standardizations of earthquake readiness throughout Oregon. Are you all following a standard that every Oregon building or construction should follow? Because I hear a lot of schools being not earthquake ready, or in the event of an earthquake, how kids are in danger. And I think we hear this time when there's a bond on the ballot, or when a school is thinking about, how do we make our building earthquake ready or more resilient. So I'm wondering, and there has been some schools that's been built because of that. So I'm wondering if there's a standard for Oregon that any construction that's going to be earthquake ready, that they have to follow these rules and recommendations. Because some of the schools that I've been part of, or some of these bond measures, the earthquake in Turkey haven't happened. And now today I heard somebody mention that earthquake, which is different than previous earthquakes. So I don't know if there's some standardization. And then the other question I had, I'll just dump on you, is a similar question that Curtis asked around the competitions of all these fundings. I'm wondering, the Future Streets project, or the Future Streets, is that construction going to happen at the same time as the Burnside Bridge is being built? What's the timeline between the two, and where's that funding going to come from?
Yeah, and Chair, I know we're trying to move along, so I'll be pretty quick here. So to your first question about standardization, we do have standards around bridges and especially specifically related to earthquake readiness. And actually, Earthquake Ready Burnside Bridge is a step above those standards just because we want to be really certain that it will definitely be usable after a Cascadia event. And many of those standards are actually not necessarily informed by what our region might see after that event. So we've done everything in our power to not only reach the standards, but exceed them if possible, just to make sure that this earthquake does what we hope it does. And, you know, I'll show my cards a bit and say that I'm a former PBEM employee, and I definitely am aware that a lot of buildings in our region are also not resilient. That work is happening in a separate space from the work around bridges just because of the transportation overlay. But I think it's something that Multnomah County does care about, given that we also have a lot of our own properties throughout. So tracking that on the state side of things. And then to your second question about timelines, we're very aware that there are going to be a lot of different projects happening at the same time as Burnside. 2025 seems to be the year where everybody is aiming right now, and whether we all make it there or not is going to remain to be seen. But a lot of the work that we're doing right now in preparation for construction is working with our trades and our labor unions and our COVID certified firms to make sure that they have what they need to be ready to do the work, at least that we hope that they can do. I can't speak for what our agencies are doing in terms of working with the people who will actually be employed on the project for their own projects, but we've been seeking things like project labor agreements and trying to make sure that when it comes time, people have been thinking about this for quite a number of years. So, you know, I think we'll have a huge boom in this region and probably need to employ a lot more people than what we have right now. So I think we're looking at a lot of other options like apprenticeship and ways we can boost jobs in the areas that will need them, because we do have a few years of lead time.
All right. We've borrowed 10 minutes from the future to have this very important conversation, but I think it merits it. It's a critical project, and thank you for bringing it. So I'll hand the floor to Commissioner Maps and Commissioner Jayapal.
Thank you very much. Hi, folks. My name's Mengus Maps. I'm the City of Portland's representative on this body. My apologies for people online. I was not able to bring my computer today, but at least I hope you can hear my voice. I'd just like to take a moment and recommend that we amend this resolution to reflect the city and county's current efforts to refund the project.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jayapal?
I think that is my cue. Thank you, Commissioner Maps. Before I propose an amendment, I just want to express our excitement at being at this point with this project. And I hope that if there was one theme that came through loud and clear from Megan and from Taylor, it is that we see this as a regional project, and we are so committed to making sure that we are thinking about it in terms of all of the other projects that are happening in the region and in terms of our collaboration. So in that spirit, we have appreciated the city's support in raising the City of Portland as well as East County cities in allowing us to raise the VRF and contribute that substantial chunk of funding for this project. We do recognize that the City of Portland in particular has some issues and concerns that it wants to bring to the table, and we are completely committed to working with the city to address those issues and design and build a bridge that really meets everybody's needs in the region. So in that spirit, I am going to offer an amendment. I'd like to make a motion to amend resolution number 5306 to include an additional whereas clause. And the clause will go as follows. Whereas Multnomah County and the City of Portland are actively collaborating on project refinements to address further actions identified in Portland City Council Resolution number 37582, and in response to public involvement during SDEIS phase. That is, I ended it with a question mark, but that is the amendment that I'm offering.
Excellent. And I believe that language has been approved by our attorneys.
Do you need a second?
So do I have a motion in a second?
Second.
Seconded. All right, excellent. So in terms of process, just as a reminder, folks, we will vote on the amendment and then we will vote on the new package. Good old process, right? So unfortunately, Connor stepped away, but if I'm able to ask our trusty Metro Attorney, Carrie, to run us through the vote, that'd be extremely appreciated.
Let's see how this goes. Commissioner Jayapal.
Aye.
Commissioner Nafisa Fai. Aye. Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Maps.
Aye.
Mayor Stovall.
Aye.
Mayor Callaway.
Aye.
Mayor Buck.
Aye.
Ryan Winsheimer.
Aye.
Sam Dessou.
Aye.
Curtis Robinhold.
Aye.
Oops, hold on. Ali Mirz.
Ali Mirzakli.
Mirzakhalili. Aye.
Thank you. Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis. Carly
Aye.
Francis.
Aye.
Mayor McInerney Ogle.
Aye.
And Sean Donahue.
Aye.
Excellent. The motion passes unanimously, and we will now move on to vote on the final package. As a reminder, it was first motioned by Mayor McInerney Ogle, and I can't recall the second, but we did have a formal motion on the table. So I apologize for not having that memory as sharp as I'd like it to be, but if we have no further conversation or comments, I can move us forward into another call for vote.
Actually, can I jump in here just real quick?
Absolutely.
I know we're running short on time, but I just want to take a moment to thank Commissioner Jayapal for that amendment. This is an important project, which is in the heart of the city. It's an important resiliency move. It's an opportunity to build infrastructure for the future that'll support walkers and bikers and public transportation of people on cars. And it'll hopefully give us access to the waterfront too. I'm really excited about this project. The city's really excited about this project. We're excited to work with the county and all of you to make this happen. I just want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think Commissioner Jayapal, do I see your hand raised as well?
That is an old hand raise.
It's
I
an
will
old
put it
hand
down.
raised. It's okay. It's okay. Great. Carrie, if you could run us through that again.
Absolutely. So just so everyone is aware of this, we are voting on Resolution 23-5306 as amended. And I will go through the roll call because I made it the first time. Commissioner Jayapal.
Aye.
Commissioner Fai.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Maps.
Aye.
Mayor Stovall.
Aye.
Mayor Callaway.
Aye.
Mayor Buck.
Aye.
Ryan Winsheimer.
Aye.
Sam Dessou.
Aye.
Curtis Robinhold.
Aye.
Ali Mirzakhalili.
Aye.
Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Carly Francis.
Aye.
Mayor McInerney Ogle.
Aye.
And Sean Donahue.
Aye.
All right. Excellent. The motion passes unanimously, and the alternative is endorsed by this body. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll move to the next item on our agenda for discussion, which is the 2023 RTP call for projects. As you know, the region is undergoing an update to the regional transportation plan. The plan guides investments in all forms of travel, motor vehicle, transit, bicycle, and walking, and the movement of goods and services throughout Greater Portland. In December, we agreed on a vision and goals to guide development of the draft project list for the plan to achieve our goals for equity, safety, climate, mobility, and a thriving economy. Since then, Metro staff continued working with your staffs through the county coordinating committees to develop a forecast of the revenues expected to be available for the life of the plan and a draft list of projects that fits within that forecast. This week, the county coordinating committees have been endorsing the countywide project lists, and TriMet, SMART, the Port, and ODOT have also been developing their draft lists. Tomorrow is the deadline for everyone to submit their draft project lists and other information that will be used to evaluate how well projects support RTP goals and help the overall transportation system. I want to recognize and thank all of the staff for the significant amount of work and coordination they've done to get to this point, and it has been a lot. So really a huge emphasis of thank you there. There will be a ton of opportunity for public feedback and future policy discussion to finalize the RTP for adoption later this fall. Your engagement throughout this process is fundamental, and together we'll, of course, deliver a plan that reflects our values for all people of all mobilities and creates healthier communities. So I now welcome Kim Ellis, who is joining us in person. Thank you, Project Manager, for the RTP update, to give us an overview of where we are and where we're headed. Kim.
Great. Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I'm excited to be here today to give you a brief update, and we'll have more information about the projects that have been identified in the coming weeks because we are still in the process of compiling them. So next slide, please. So I'll just give you an update of what the process has been, where we're headed, and then what are the next steps for JPAC as we continue to work to develop the Regional Transportation Plan for your consideration this fall, along with the Metro Council. Next slide. This is a reminder of the overall timeline. Our current plan that's been in place since 2018 expires in December, so this timeline is really aimed at getting us to an adopted 2023 Regional Transportation Plan by December 6th of this year. That's really important because not meeting that date puts in jeopardy some of the federal dollars that you have been previously talking about. So not only are we trying to develop a plan that does match the values and priorities of JPACT and the Council, but we're trying to do so in a way that's also keeping those federal transportation dollars flowing to the region. Next slide. So we've been working very hard with you, with the Metro Council and your staff and others throughout last year to update the policy framework. Last summer, we started developing a revenue forecast. That work has continued into this new year as we're finalizing the call for projects. We also did a needs assessment that you had before you last fall that just described the range of different mobility, climate, equity, safety needs of the region and the types of transportation investments that are going to help address those needs and help support our region's economy. There's been a number of engagement activities along the way, and really all of that work fed into JPACT and the Metro Council accepting the policy framework last December and supporting staff moving forward with the call for projects. So that's really been the focus of our efforts since January. Really, a lot of the call for projects work started last fall, working with your staff to review the current project list in the plan, RTP, the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, to review and identify projects that have been completed, projects that are no longer priorities, and also to begin identifying new projects that have emerged since 2018 in response to new local planning, state planning, and regional planning that have identified other priorities to pursue. So that work has really focused and fed into updating the project list through this call for projects. Next slide. This is just a reminder of the vision statement that was accepted back in December and the 5 goals: equity, climate, mobility, safety, and a thriving economy. And that really is going to be our, I think as Commissioner Savas and others have continued to say, the North Star guiding our work as we update this project list, evaluate it, and also as we continue to finalize the draft plan for further public review this year. Next slide. The revenue forecast has been much more complicated and challenging for this RTP. The revenue forecast that we develop, this is something that the Federal Highway Administration looks at very closely, and the process that we go about doing it. So we work with every agency in the region to identify revenues that are generated locally, that are also federal funding and state funding that are directly passed through to local agencies, the funding that is generated by the transit providers in our region through their fares, but also they also receive state and federal funding, and then the revenues that ODOT also receives either through the legislature, other state-generated revenues, federal funding, and then new to this regional transportation plan is some of the tolling revenues that are going to be part of the projects that ODOT is bringing forward into the RTP process. So that work, that's why that work, we began that last summer, and it really has taken till now to get all of that together. We're still continuing to document that, and we'll have more the numbers to share at a future meeting. I don't have that just yet, but we have been working with all of the agencies so they know essentially what their funding targets are for the project list that we develop. One thing I also would like to just say is that the revenues that we're identifying are not just for capital projects, but it's revenues that are also used to maintain and operate the system. So part of the work that we have to do is to demonstrate that not only do we have money, the revenues needed to adequately maintain our road systems, our transit systems, we have to back that out first, and then what's left is what is available for the capital projects that are included in the regional transportation plan. Next slide. So the call for projects formally launched January 6th, and it's been a very busy 6 weeks for everybody. The cities, the counties, and all of the agencies, as Chair Gonzalez said, the Port, TriMet, ODOT, and SMART have been working together to identify and update the project priorities through the year 2045. Each of the county coordinating committees worked with their cities to also develop sort of a county-wide list of priorities, and that's what was being endorsed this week by the county coordinating committees, were those local priorities for their part of the transportation system. We had asked each of those agencies and the coordinating committees to basically identify 3 buckets of projects, the first is the near-term priorities. Those are financially constrained within the revenue forecast, and those would be the projects that we would anticipate to be completed by 2030. The second bucket are more long-term constrained priorities that would be in that 2031 to 2045 time period. And that's those constrained priorities, but the near-term and long-term have to fit within that revenue forecast that I described. We also we can't fit all our needs. We have many more needs than we have resources available. So we also have a third bucket that we identify in the regional transportation plan that we call the strategic list. And those represent additional projects that we either need to do more study, we need to work together to find revenue to advance those projects in the future, but they represent other priorities, additional priorities that the region agrees to pursue to find ways to be able to fund those, because they are transportation needs, they're addressing transportation needs. Next slide. So as Chair Gonzalez said, tomorrow's the deadline for the projects to be submitted to Metro staff. We're working, we have an online hub database that local governments and the agencies are using to provide more information about each project. We'll use that information to then begin an evaluation process that's looking at the overall project list and how it's advancing those 5 RTP goals, but also doing more in-depth technical analysis using our regional travel demand model. We'll also be doing climate analysis to see whether that updated project list also meets our climate targets that the state has set before us, and we'll be reporting that information out over the spring, leading to further discussion of JPACT and the Metro Council about the project list and whether the projects that are submitted and the range of projects that are being recommended in the near term and long term really are the best to advance the regional goals and priorities across the region. In June, JPACT and the Metro Council will be asked to support advancing the draft plan and the project list for further public review. And in advance of that June action, not only will we be having discussion about the evaluation results with JPACT and the Metro Council, but we'll also be engaging the public on those preliminary draft lists. So JPACT and the Council will have the benefit of hearing some early feedback on what's been submitted as part of that, in advance of that June action. With that June action, that will then kick into motion, staff finalizing the draft plan and project list to release for formal 45-day comment period in July and August. And then in the fall, starting in September, we'll be going through an adoption process, which I can describe a little bit more. Next slide. The engagement that I mentioned that we'll be doing around the project list, we have contracted with community-based organizations to have them working directly with their communities. There's more information about that in your packet to seek feedback on the draft list. There's also, you've had several discussions around the update to the high-capacity transit strategy. Ali Holmquist, Metro's lead, has been working very closely with TriMet on a series of tabling events that just were completed earlier this year on the high-capacity transit strategy. There's also a business forum that has also happened, an online story map and survey that's happening right now. It may have closed this week. I've lost track of the date of that. But we'll also have other ways for the public to engage in the project list. An online survey. We want to have maps and information about each of the projects available. We'll be hosting a community leaders forum. Also doing consultation meetings with some of our regulatory agencies as well as tribes. We've been engaging with the tribes in the area throughout the RTP process. And then also a business leaders forum in May or June that's still being developed. And that forum will be both on the regional transportation plan, but also a regional freight study, the freight delay and commodities movement study that has been going on concurrent with the regional transportation plan update. The final piece is, as I said, the 45-day comment period that we'll be hosting this summer before finalizing the plan for adoption. Next slide. These are a lot of the key dates here. Tomorrow's the next big date. And the schedule there just highlights what I've already said. I think a couple things that I'd like to note, in addition to the deadline for entering and submitting the project list to Metro tomorrow, there is an opportunity for there to be refinements to those project lists. And so we're asking for any changes that project sponsors would like to make as they engage with their policymakers or consider the results of the evaluation and the public feedback we get this spring to submit any changes by May 24th. And that then will be, any changes will be brought forward to JPACT and Council as part of those GENE discussions, and then the comment period and fall adoption process. Next slide. So that's the project website, oregonmetro.gov/RTP. There's a lot of information of all the things that have been developed to date to support development of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or feedback.
Thank you, Kim. All right, let's have some good, fruitful conversation, shall we? Commissioner Savas, I see you have your hand raised, please.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I've been through several RTP processes over the last couple decades, and I will say we are in unprecedented times and where there are so many projects, there's so much happening in transportation. I don't recall ever a time where there's been this much work. And I think the processes and timelines has fit pretty well, reasonably well for those past processes with those past projects and the scope, but it is so, there's so much on the table now. The timelines are putting so much pressure on us, and there's also a lot of uncertainty as it relates to, and again, being at ground zero in Clackamas County with the tolling project, uncertainty about tolling revenues and what those really are not. We haven't got any clarity from ODOT. I'm not critical of ODOT here today, or anyone, or staff, or anyone. It's just an observation. And same thing goes with the mitigation projects, whether or not they'll happen. And it's very unclear what what and when will be built where. Our jurisdictions in Clackamas County, as well as our citizen groups that are impacted in the unincorporated areas around this project are just, I won't say they're coming unglued, but there's so much uncertainty as what will be the solutions or what will be the mitigation. And I think we've heard from, in our C4 coordinating committees, we've heard in our community other settings, C4, others, that when and how. And the timeline is just challenging to do all of that and circle back and yet have all these significant unknowns. Unknowns relates to climate, greenhouse gas measures that I'm not sure we're really gonna meet. I'll talk about that on the next, on 6-2. But most especially the timeline. So I just hope we can have some flexibility. And I don't know how we can expedite any kind of, revenue information, because that's part of this RTP, is part of all this, yet we don't have that. And I don't know what the projects are to ask for to be included in the RTP, because we don't know what that's going to be. So I just want to just express that. There's no ask here, just a concern.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I really appreciate your comments, and a lot of those things we've been talking about internally as well, and just highlighting the importance of so many new projects, fundamental changes to policy that inform the RTP. I mean, I definitely acknowledge that we're testing a lot of systems in our region right now, but of course, I think we have some tremendous leverage opportunities with the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I think generally we're on the right track. But Margie, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So the planning exercise, and it's a very important exercise, so I don't want to diminish it, is extremely important to try to map out the best we can our long-term plans for the next 10, 20 years. And it's hard to do when you have so much uncertainty, but it is that exercise of talking about our priorities. And I think that's the question Curtis had before of how do we prioritize? We have so much going on. And really the RTP process is the vehicle in which we do that exercise, knowing that we have uncertainty, but really coming to the table saying, what are we going to do in the next 10 years? What are we going to do in the next 20 years? And then we have the strategic list, which is really the visionary list. What is our wish list? What do we want to accomplish? And so I would say, even though there's a lot of uncertainty, it's even that much more important to plan. We have been working very hard with ODOT on incorporating tolling into the RTP. This is our first time for everybody. And I just want to kind of go through the different ways that congestion pricing and tolling are in the RTP. Their policy, which we all worked on policy development, congestion pricing. There are the financially constrained assumptions, which we're continuing to work through with our partners at ODOT and FHWA. And they will also expect to have tolling on the project list. And we're trying to marry those three, and we'll get there, but it's a lot because it's a new exercise for everyone, all the local planners, federal partners, state partners. But we have a good reputation for being able to work together and going to JPACT and speaking with one voice. So I'm sure we're going to work through this and get through this RTP and be able to speak with one voice to our congressional members for the JPACT trip in May.
Just a quick follow. Thank you, Margie, for that. Just want to just in advance say that as we progress, should we still have concerns? I want it on, not really on record, but just cognizant with respect to all my colleagues that if we raise these issues, it's because of this core issue of so much. So I don't want to be disrespectful in the future, but I'm just trying to prepare ourselves for the reality we're going to be facing until now towards the end of the year when we finish this product.
Yeah, it's a lot for staff as well. And I just want to acknowledge all the staff listening in and all the staff in the room because it's an incredible amount of technical work that they've been working on this past 6 weeks.
We have our work cut out for us, absolutely. Councilor Lewis?
Sure. Thank you so much. I want to begin by just reflecting on the conversation we had at C4 Metro Sub yesterday, which Commissioner Savas just really ably represented the frustration with seeing tolling coming into the RTP, but not really on the balance sheet of funds that we can use in local communities for the needs that we know will be there, particularly with diversion. But when I think through the work that the cities and the county have done, I think they've put together a really good list. We have good projects coming forward from Clackamas County. So that is commending our staffs and also our city local electeds who have brought forward multimodal and good solutions. I wish there was a little bit more coordination on transit readiness because that is something that's such a barrier. We need to do all of our planning, thinking through future transit options. The thing that I want to raise as we contemplate the RTP is what's missing. And I think that is a strategic plan to address urban arterials. We do not see urban arterials coming forward. And if we are going to be asking the state legislature to help us with arterial investment and jurisdictional transfer, like I think we should every year, if we're going to be on that sort of cadence, we need more urban arterials to have come forward as RTP projects. And in fact, the only way that I see my arterials come forward is through local funds. So you have Milwaukee doing 99E, and you have nearly $15 million of West Lynn's money going into 43, but they're not on the ODOT list. So I think we need a more comprehensive approach to what we're doing, investing in our urban arterials, because we know it's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Ashton Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank and appreciate all the staff hours and time and effort they put into putting this list together. My hat goes off to them. But as I also think about this, I do want to elevate what Councillor Lewis just shared. We should definitely be making safety a priority on our corridors and urban arterials, because we need to uplift those communities and those who don't have the means, access, or ability to use motorized vehicles, particularly in low income and communities of color. The data reflects that these communities are oftentimes the heavily impacted by these unsafe and road conditions that currently exist. Too many lives have currently been lost, and it's not slowing down. And I believe we all have a duty here to ensure their safety. So I really want to elevate that we need to make high crash corridors and urban arterials and in the RTP a safe and complete streets priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Winsheimer.
Thank you. Boy, so much to talk about. Thank you. I think Commissioner Savas, I just want to recognize your points and let you know that we too are really trying our best to try to get to answers. We're at a place right now where, NEPA is just getting done, or NEPA is just starting in the case of RMPP. So there is still a lot of work to do, a lot of projects to do. And I would just reflect, for example, Southwest Corridor has been in the RTP for years, but we didn't know exactly which street it was going to go down, and we didn't know exactly what mitigations were going to be needed. But we worked our way through those processes after those projects were in the RTP, and we continued to work through those as a region and identifying those. I was just going to also, just to recognize the point on safety, I just put a little bit of information in the chat. ODOT actually has a programmatic bucket in the RTP that's about, I think it's right now, it's $839 million to improve safety and operational efficiencies, PED crossing, speed feedback signs, all the kinds of things that we need to see to make our roads safer. And just some examples of things that have recently happened that were not necessarily programmed specifically in the RTP. Right now, my crews and contractors are out closing all of the sidewalk gaps and all of the bike lane gaps in 99W. Between I-5 and McDonald Street. That's happening today. And the reason it is because we have a bucket like this where when those opportunities arise and funding arises, we can marry them up and put them in. And they don't necessarily need to be pre-identified. But that's not to minimize Councillor Lewis's point. We need to set these as priorities. And my key point on that is once we have those priorities set and we have a program we want to go do, we need to go find those real dollars, and we can use buckets like this to make sure that those elements are programmed in, and we can go deliver them. So I just want to recognize those needs and say ODOT wants to be a partner in making sure that we close the gap on all of those things and achieve them. And I put a couple more examples in there just so you can see the kinds of things that that we need to go do more of, but that we can address with a bucket like this.
Thank you, Ryan. Mr. Mirzakhalili.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding the process by which the projects that are being recommended will be evaluated. I know there's a filter for how they meet our vision criteria, but as you know that is it they address safety? What's the mechanism of scoring? Is there a how are they thinking about this, and will there be transparency for the members here to see that? Is that going to be done at the JPACT level or staff level, and we'll see the final rank? Okay, here's these projects came up to the top because they check all these boxes, and will we be able to get a discussion? And I don't know if we have the bandwidth to engage at that level, but I just want to see what is the process, and if somebody could explain that for real briefly, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So yes, we have been, we worked with JPACT earlier this year, late last year, to develop a project assessment, a project list assessment. So we're organizing that assessment around each of the 5 goals to identify which projects are really best advancing the safety goal, the equity goal, the climate goal, the economic goal. And I think I forgot one, but the 5 goals, and we will document that and be very transparent about how we're thinking, how that those ratings are being developed. And it'll also provide a way to show what projects are actually advancing multiple goals, because there are many projects that are advancing all 5 in some cases. And so it'll really provide a way for JPACT and the council to really, and the public to really sort of engage in the project list in a more meaningful way. So we are working to have that information to bring to you at your April meeting. We're doing, that the first bit of work after the close of the call for projects is basically creating that geospatial analysis. It's going to be a very simplified analysis, so I want to be clear about that. It's not going to be perfect, but it is going to be a way to really try and frame how projects are advancing each of those. In addition to that, we'll be doing the more in-depth modeling work using our regional travel demand model to look at the overall system performance across those goal areas as well. And that information we will also have for JPACT and the Metro Council. And we'll be working with TPAC, the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee, and the Metro Technical Advisory Committee, in advance of bringing it to you for your discussion. My hope is that will be part of the conversation at that joint workshop that is scheduled for May 11th, because that'll be an important time for JPACT and the Metro Council to come together and talk about, are these the priorities that we want to advance into the list. One other thing, just in terms of the projects, I think that was a little bit in the question. All projects that, in order to be in the regional transportation plan, they need to have come from a process or plan that was adopted and developed with the public, with opportunities for public comment. So these are all projects that have been identified in local plans, transit plans, other planning activities before they even come into the regional transportation plan, and that's really important and an important aspect of this. They don't come from just out anywhere. They've had a lot of process. They've had a lot of vetting already through the local level before they even come to be part of the regional transportation plan.
So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I see General Manager Sam Dessou, hand raised.
Thanks, Chair. Really appreciate that. Kim, want to just really thank you, all of the agencies that are participating, our staffs. Really appreciate that. The comment I want to make is that we want to let all of you know that we've heard you. about the need to invest more in transit to improve access throughout the region to provide this service to our residents. So this is something that all of our agencies, CTRAN, TriMet, SMART, we're going to work together to ensure that this happen. TriMet's priority in the short term, we're going to implement the Forward Together bus service, and we're looking at that to move us forward to grow ridership. But we also need to work together to really identify a local match and new revenue for all of our high-capacity transit projects that's in Tier 1 to really grow that high-capacity network. So, Chair, I really appreciate that, so thank you.
All right, I see no more hands raised, so I'll prepare to move us to the next agenda item. And again, I want to thank folks for a robust conversation and for sharing what they see happening in the headwinds. And I know we're asking a lot from our partners and from our staff, but this RTP is not only a spending plan, it's really our vision. And I think our region really wants to see its leaders come together and communicate a clear vision for access, economic development, all of those things. I think we hear that very clearly from our constituents. So I feel very positive about this process. Item 6.2, Climate Smart Strategy. Kim Ellis is going to stay with us. So as a part of the 2023 RTP, we're going to update our Climate Smart Strategy as needed to stay on track to meet the climate goals the state has set for us. Kim is going to give us an overview of the feedback we provided at our climate workshop with the Metro Council last November. She'll also touch on the work ahead with the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee and the Metro Technical Advisory Committee to conduct an analysis of the draft list of projects that will be submitted tomorrow. The analysis will estimate the gap between the region's existing climate smart strategies as reflected in the 2018 RTP and our greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2045. Kim will provide an update on Metro's implementation of the climate-friendly equitable communities rule adopted by the Land Conservation and Development Commission last summer as well, which I know has been a pretty significant topic of conversation throughout the region. So Kim and
Great,
Margie
thank you,
and team,
Chair
please.
Gonzalez. I'll quickly go through a review of where we are. Next slide. Yep. So these are the two purposes today, just to share some key takeaways of what we heard and the next steps for that climate analysis work. And then also in your packet was a letter that Metro submitted to the Land Conservation and Development Commission, or the department staff, on our proposed timeline for implementing the parts of the climate-friendly equitable communities rules that apply to the RTP and to Metro. There are other requirements of cities and counties in the region, but we thought it was important that you are aware of where we are in terms of what the RTP is going to address. There'll be future work beyond the RTP update as well. Next slide. Just as a reminder, at the workshop back in November, we did a sort of what are the sort of top 10 things to know about Climate Smart, and I'm not going to go through all of those. You'll see that in the workshop summary, but I think it's just important to continue to acknowledge that Climate Smart was adopted in response to state mandates, and it was adopted in 2014. There was a long history of work that was happening at the state level, both at the legislative level, but also with the state commissions that led to that adoption with broad support. And there's been continuing work at the state level, but also in our region to implement that strategy through the Regional Transportation Plan. And so part of our work with this update is to review how we're doing. That's one of our requirements of the state, is to look at that with each Regional Transportation Plan update. Next slide. I think it's also important to continue to remind ourselves that the targets that were set by the state were targets for greenhouse gas emissions reductions from light-duty vehicles, so that's passenger cars, small trucks, SUVs, and then small delivery vehicles. And that those targets, for this RTP, it's a 30% reduction from 2005 levels, that those are reductions in addition to what the state assumed would occur through changes to the fleet and vehicle technologies that would make basically our fleet of those light-duty vehicles cleaner, zero emission, or low emission. So there's a lot of work that's been happening. DEQ and their commission, the Environmental Quality Commission, has been passing rules since then that are really implementing federal and ambitious state goals to get to that fleet transition. So for our work in this analysis that we'll be doing on the draft project list, we'll be looking to see whether or not we are on track to meet that 30% reduction target. In the 2018 RTP, we had that 25%, and we did find in the work at that time and some of the initial work we're doing now to set up the analysis for this plan update that we were on track to meeting that 25%. But we know, based on the workshop discussion and information we presented to you at that time, a lot has changed since 2018 because of COVID, changes in transit service, and other resource issues. So it's time for us to take a look and see what we may need to adjust to stay on track. Next slide. Also important that our work at developing the climate smart strategy really reaffirmed the importance of our land use vision, the 2040 growth concept for our region, and that it will continue to serve as a platform for local and regional climate action in ways that are getting to the 6 desired outcomes and the RTP goals that I described earlier. Next slide. And through our work and the discussions at the November workshop, but development of the climate smart strategy really found that community design, transit, active transportation investments, investing in travel demand management programs, commuter travel options, household marketing and car sharing programs, and system management and operations are all really important parts of our climate smart strategy. They all have different greenhouse gas reduction potential, but we also found, as we presented in November, that no one strategy is going to get us there, including the transition of the fleet and vehicles, but we really have to be doing all of these things as much as we can, as fast as we can, to meet the climate crisis that is before us. Next slide. This just highlights, again, the different elements of our climate smart strategy, and they are all reflected in the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan and is our starting point. Next slide. And we are looking at the analysis work that will be looking at how well our draft RTP performs. The state gives us very specific direction on what we can assume around the transition to the fleet of vehicles, the fuel and vehicle programs that were adopted as part of the statewide transportation strategy that the Oregon Transportation Commission approved back in 2018. So together, we'll be comparing or bringing together those statewide transportation strategy assumptions and the draft RTP to look at what our performance is. And that's what we'll be reporting out. And as I said, one of the requirements of us, of our region, not only was it to develop climate smart and implement it, but also to review it as part of each regional transportation plan update and report on that progress. Next slide. Guiding that work will be the new climate goal that is shown here that JPACT and the Metro Council accepted last December. And also in recognizing that we're not just trying to meet the climate goals, we're trying to meet all of those goals. And so as we go forward to refine and update the climate smart strategy, it needs to be in the context of meeting those targets, but doing so while meeting these other goals of the plan. Next slide. And at the workshop, and there's a longer summary report of the discussion, we asked questions about what were priorities for this RTP to advance implementing the climate smart strategy. And even though they were asked in different ways, the top 3 priorities really continued to come up the same: increased transit service, active transportation options, and system management and operations. The other strategies that were shown here, there's also a recognition that they will be a part of what will be part of our work and the regional transportation plan. But those top 3, continue to rise to the top throughout the discussion. Next slide. And so that, I think, and a few takeaways from that is that it did reaffirm sort of that the climate smart strategy as a strategy is a good strategy that really is reflective of the priorities, but we do need to look in more detail in some of the different areas that either it doesn't account for currently or that we may need to adjust because of what has changed. While increasing transit service is a priority, we do expect that this RTP may have less transit service than we had in the last RTP, and we'll see that as we begin looking at that evaluation. Earlier this morning, and many JPACT discussions, there's a lot of hopes and concerns around congestion pricing, and that's not something that we have as part of the current strategy, but we will be evaluating what that does in terms of what ODOT is bringing forward into this plan and how that might help meet those climate goals. The climate-friendly equitable communities rulemaking has new parking requirements of cities and counties across the region. And so that's also a strategy that does help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that we will want to think about how we might account for that in this work. But I think overall, the JPACT and council discussion really highlighted that we need to be relying on a mix of strategies that advance local priorities, regional priorities, state priorities, and find what the best mix. There were comments throughout that workshop and also subsequent discussions with the Metro Policy Advisory Committee around better accounting for telework. That's not something that we have accounted for before, and so we do have a consultant on board to help support our climate analysis, and we will be looking to try and account for that in this work to see what impacts that is having on meeting our targets and other goals. And then finally, there's a recognition that land use does have a significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions, and that this RTP isn't going to be revisiting that land use vision, but there's future work that'll be happening after the RTP update to review the 2040 growth concept and update it. And at that time, that work will really be thinking about the climate outcomes from that review of the 2040 growth concept. But we'll be using what has been our growth distribution for our region based on how the growth concept is being implemented locally throughout the region. This feedback and these priorities are going to continue to guide our work as we go forward. Next slide. So our next step is to begin to estimate whether or not the draft RTP will meet our target. We're going to be looking at the transit service that is being brought forward, both high-capacity transit service, but also bus service that we're working with TriMet to incorporate. As I mentioned, we'll be looking to account for teleworking, implementation of road pricing within this work, and then also what the potential increase in parking pricing or parking management across the region and how we might account for that. We'll be doing that work with the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee and Metro Technical Advisory Committee. We kicked off our first workshop with them yesterday. We'll be having more discussions with them in March and April as we're doing this evaluation work, and we'll have information and potentially options for JPACT and the Metro Council to be considering when we bring that work forward to you. Next slide. I already covered this in the last presentation, but just, this is all connected. As Commissioner Chavez says, there's a lot of moving parts to this RTP, and this is one of them. But this is all working towards developing, doing an analysis of the work and the projects that are being brought forward and getting to that public review draft plan this summer. Next slide. And then this is just a more detailed schedule, a little bit more detailed. That's also in your packet. Next slide. And then the final thing I wanted to provide an update on, and I'll ask if Margie wants to make some additional comments, but the climate-friendly equitable communities rulemaking does have new policies and requirements for Metro that further direct Metro in this work. And we are very committed to addressing that as part of this RTP update and continuing to help support our local partners as they're working through a lot of the analysis and tools that and information we're developing for the RTP, as well as the mobility policy work that JPACT and the Metro Council move forward into the process this year or in December are really going to help provide a platform for how we're going forward. Next slide. In your packet, as I mentioned, is the letter that we submitted. I think the key dates that I just wanted to highlight here today, and we can answer questions that you may have, but adoption of the RTP and an RTP that meets the state target by December 6th is one of the proposed schedule as a first step, and that will also include our updated mobility policy, which will be including vehicle miles traveled, travel speed, and system completeness as part of the measures of how we're measuring performance and identifying needs, and that is consistent with the new rules within those climate-friendly equitable communities rules. And then also Metro has specific requirements around that direction in the rules to adopt functional plan amendments. The first is on the land use side. There are a small number of cities in the region that have not yet adopted their centers boundaries that are reflected on the 2040 growth concept map. So the rules directed Metro that by December 31st of next year that we amend our functional plan, the urban growth management functional plan, to require cities and counties to adopt those boundaries, and that the cities and counties adopt those boundaries by the end of 2025. We have looked at those centers, those locations, and many of those already have mixed-use zoning. They are centers, essentially they are centers in local codes. They just haven't adopted the boundaries, and so it's not anticipated to be a burden, a big burden, and is really just further making it consistent and addressing that requirement. The second date is that or third date is by December 31st of 2025 that we amend the regional transportation functional plan. And that functional plan is how we direct local implementation of the regional transportation plan. So that has been in place since 1996. The last update to that was back in 2012. And so there's a lot of housekeeping updates that we need to do, frankly, in addition to updating it to reflect what's coming out of this RTP, that gets considered by the end of the year, and then the updated state rules. And we will be working with the two technical advisory committees, TPAC and MTAC, with that work to scope it and then actually do the work, and that will come to JPACT and the Metro Council and MPAC as well for their recommendation in 2025. So I will stop there and see if there's questions.
Thank you. Margie, do you want to share anything before I open the floor? No? Okay, great. This is our last item on the agenda, so the conversation can go almost up to close. I acknowledge that some folks might have to leave to make other meetings, and also want to welcome Councilor Brett Sherman, who's the alternate for the cities of Clackamas County, replacing Mayor Buck, who had to step away earlier. Commissioner Chavez, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, this is a really appreciate, Kim, your presentation, and this is something that's, I've really had my whole career has been in air quality as it relates to transportation-related emissions and technology. So I bring a perspective where I think really over all these years, decades, that the biggest advancements in air quality and improvements in air quality have come from technology itself, and with electric cars and hydrogen and all the other innovations that are coming out. If I was a bank, where we would invest in for a return on investment, I put my money there. That said, I can't help but thinking about the crisis we have all around us here in this region, around this country, and this state, that particularly the homeless crisis and the cost of living is driving so many people out on the street. And I am very concerned as it relates to this topic that some of the means in which we are using policies and pricing, will contribute to those people really having to lose the roof over their heads, not being able to afford their housing. We've heard that one doctor's bill, one auto repair bill, or some other unknown medical bill of $500 can trigger people losing their homes. So if you look and you calculate out what this does to our households, to our constituents, some of these things, that the economic effect, the humane, the effect on the people that are on the street right now, it concerns me. It concerns me that some of these things we're taking will not produce the results that are dictated by the state, the federal, our own, and whatnot. So I think we need to be extremely careful in what we implement here and making sure it works. And I really have a concern that there's really not an understanding between the delta or the difference of what it means mathematically and chemically between vehicle miles traveled and vehicle hours traveled. And really what that really displays in simple terms is that if you are spending more time in your car with the engine running or driving around on local streets because you're avoiding tolling or you don't have the capacity on a particular road or arterial to get where you need to get, that engine is running longer, it is producing more greenhouse gases. If people are evading or moving farther away because they can't afford a home in the metro region and they're driving from Salem or the Dalles, Eastern Oregon, Chehalis, all these areas because of economics, we're making the situation worse, and it just compounds. So I'm not going to take a lot of time other than say that I think we need to be extremely mindful about what we implement and how we price it, so we don't price people out of their homes. But the effect, the impact, their goal for reduced greenhouse gases, I totally buy into that, but I don't know that these policies will get us there per se. And at the risk of actually making people homeless, a lot said, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Commissioner. Ali?
Yep. Thank you. Again, I want to just make sure that there's something on with rulemaking that the EQ is undertaking is on your radar screen, Kim. That's the employee commute option. We're having conversation with our advisory council on ways to improve the current standards and current requirements, and it's been an ongoing conversation that continues. I think we learned a lot of lessons through pandemic and how the future of work it can look like, and I think so trying to incorporate those learnings in our approach in employee commute and how we get there. And I think that has a to Paul's comments here is the how if we don't put people in a car to get to their employment, and that can certainly mean money back in their pocket. It's an addition. Also, I think technology is a big solution here. I think it's as hybrid vehicles when they are not running hard on slow speeds and the congestion, they're actually running on battery. So it doesn't give you the greenhouse gas profile that the old combustion engines had. So I think and certainly the electric vehicles we're trying to transition to would have a whole different greenhouse gas impact for us moving in the future. So as we are investing in our transition to electrification, you just want to make sure that those cars are affordable to and available And the price and cost of ownership is actually lower for electric vehicles than they are with internal combustion engines. Given the price of gas is. So a lot of moving parts, and I totally agree that these are all connected pieces.
Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to these comments, I think it's a both and situation, especially considering multimodal options. I think about communities in East Multnomah County that are low income, that cannot afford these types of vehicles, that don't have access to them. And so increasing transit, but also electrifying that fleet would be very helpful in those communities, but also providing ways that folks can move around in multimodal ways will also help reduce greenhouse gases. But and to Commissioner Savis's point, a lot of these families out here are one check away from something happening, or they have slim margins, and this has been going on for decades. So I'd like to at least put that out there that that urgency should have always been there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Commissioner Mapps.
Thanks. I just wanted to take a moment and express my appreciation for the conversation we heard today. Everything that I heard resonates with me. I also want to, there's something I haven't heard that I want to underscore, which is we see trends of people taking public transportation less. I hope that we can turn that around. And as we think about our climate smart strategies moving forward, I hope that we place more emphasis in that space where we've kind of backslid in recent years and tried to develop some options to get people where they want to go without relying on the a car with just one person in it. I think there's a lot of potential there. COVID and other recent events kind of push us backwards, but I think that is one of the places where the future really is. So I look forward to see what you're going to do, Sam. So,
We all are. We all are. All right, folks. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Fye, of course.
Quick one, Kim, great presentation. Is Metro, as the MPO, thinking of other fundings for local jurisdictions creatively? And if you could talk us through, I see you shaking your head, so it might be a yes, but it sounds like there are a lot of fundings out there to do this work, but currently there is no funding to do this work too, so.
Yeah, that's a great question, a timely question, actually. DLCD staff have reached out to me this morning. So the state is funding planning and some implementation work already, but there is a grant stream the Environmental Protection Agency announced that is going to be for planning and implementation of carbon reduction strategies. So we'll be looking at that. MPOs are eligible to apply, but I think also other governments are as well. And so that's something that we'll be looking at more closely to see just what it is. It's supposed to be released March 1st. And so we'll be looking at that. And I see maybe Marky would like to add other context. I know there's also funding available by ODOT and DLCD. And I just want to say on the CFC rulemaking that we understand here at Metro that it's a massive administrative load for our cities and counties and adds another regulatory layer, although we embrace and applaud DLCD for their goals around climate and equity, which align at least with Metro's goals. We are trying to reduce that burden by aligning as much as we can with what Metro has. Kim mentioned our functional plan and our kind of structure from Climate Smart with the CFC rules, so that you really, local cities and counties don't have two sets of compliance or feel like they have two masters in terms of meeting those rules. So that's another way that we can help, is by being really clear of
being really clear what applies to the cities and counties from both DLCD and Metro, as well as advocating for local funding for you. And I will say our lobbyist is also in Salem advocating for local funding for you to implement this rule.
Any follow-ups?
No, it's on. They tend to be sometimes.
Yeah. I think.
I'm not sure if it's my own voice or if I'm projecting that, but thank you, Chair. I don't really have any follow-ups other than to say if we do get some funding, that we also mirror some of the public health funding or the public health modernization funding, how they distribute the funding to local jurisdictions, but also community-based organizations were involved, and we're really meaningfully want to address low-income communities and ways to address this or help us meet this strategy. I think we should just try to see how we can mimic that strategy of dispersing funding to local-based, to community-based organizations as well as the local jurisdictions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ryan?
Thank you. Sorry, and I couldn't hear the last speaker because of the mic issue. So just I know that's something we're gonna have to keep working through. So, but I did want to just say quickly, and I know Councilor Gonzalez and a number of other folks who are at the ACT know this. As we work through our planning process here and we start identifying what we want to do, then we got to get to the part where we're really advocating hard and delivering on the funding piece. And we just went through the prioritization process at the ACT for the STIF applications on the discretionary side. And just as a reminder, we're doing, micro mobility ask out there in Washington County. There's a streetcar ambassador program to help improve safety and improve ridership in the city of Portland. So hearing that from the city of Portland on how do we get folks back, I think that's going to be key. Electrification, there's a number of those, and that program, just being able to add just a few dollars here and there to help support these types of programs. A lot of the smaller transit districts are talking about doing a number of research type projects in terms of how to implement efficiencies in their systems, and then specifically in their applications, calling out how they're going to be sharing those across the region with other providers. So there is a lot of those opportunities out there. There's a desire to do them, and STIF is one opportunity to help fund those. But as we set our policies here, we have to remember that the bottom line is we actually have to go get the dollars, and then we got to go implement it. And that's the next step, that we can't just stop here at this table. We got to get to the part where we're actually delivering that. And we are, as a region, doing that. We just are going to need to continue to do that if we want to be successful on the climate smart.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing that. Yeah, a lot of good stuff in that. Gorge Transit, a whole bunch of good things at the R1 Act. So thank you for the update. All right, I see no more hands raised, so we're edging towards closing the meeting. I do have one last thing on the agenda, which is member updates. If folks do wish to share any pleasant news or not so pleasant news, it's your prerogative. But not seeing anyone rushing for their Zoom hand button or their cards, I am happy to move us to closing, and we'll gavel us out of the meeting. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, of course. Sorry.
Yeah, a quick word about the JPACT trip. I believe the dates Councilor Gonzalez gave, I want to slightly modify those.
Okay, thank you.
Just checking calendars, it's June 5th through 8th. I believe he said 6th, so
Correct.
5th is a Monday. Fly out Monday. Okay, thank you. I'm looking at Tom. Thank you, TriMet, for their partnership. TriMet does a lot of work to plan this. So we fly out Monday on a 5th. There's Alaska Airline flight. If you want to know what that flight is, contact my assistant, Lisa Hutchins, who's doing a lot of planning on this. I believe we're all trying to stay at the same hotel this year, a Hyatt nearby Summit Strategies. Again, contact me or my assistant, and we fly back on the 8th. So we go fly in on a Monday, congressional meetings on Tuesday, right, Tom? US DOT meetings on Wednesday, fly out that evening.
Of the 8th?
Of the 8th. Wait, yes, I'm looking at Tom. Did I get that right?
Fly out on Thursday.
Fly out on Thursday. So fly in Monday, which
Tuesday,
Wednesday,
fly out Thursday.
fly out on Thursday. Thank you. So we'll, if interested, we can we'll make sure my executive assistant can reach all of your assistants to make sure you've got all the details correctly. And of course, we'll be back with a more detailed agenda. I just want to make sure we got that right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Feiss, your hand up, your
Yeah,
card raised.
thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, if that's okay for Margie, Chair. Margie, this is my first time attending this trip, and I'm really looking forward to it. Is this something that I take care of from my end, or is this a TriMet trip? That
So
will arrange all the transportation and board?
It's a partnership, but go ahead, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, your staff will make your own arrangements for you, but we'll give them all the information about the times and dates and the agendas. And I know your team, and they know me, so please call me with any questions you guys have,
So you take care of your own flight and hotel and Summit Strategies, and Tom will take care of the rest.
Tom, you don't have the fundings to.
All right, folks, well, it's 9:30. The JPACT trip will be great, I can assure you. Thank you so much. And I'll see you at our next meeting, which I believe is March 16th. Gracias, thank you.
Recording stopped.
we usually just look to Washington County.